And we have some breaking news here. Tesla, Bloomberg has learned, is looking into building a U.S. EV factory. It would be in partnership with China's electric vehicle battery maker, CATL. And according to Bloomberg reporting, Texas is a possible plant site for this factory. Tesla has recently...
Hi, it's Lee, and welcome to the Tesla Economist. Bloomberg are reporting the possibility that Tesla are pursuing a US-based battery factory with CATL. We know very little about the details yet, but there are a lot of assumptions we can make in order to get an idea of how this might occur and what it means. Obviously, one of the major reasons for building the factory in the US, and yes, apparently is actually in the US, not Mexico, is so that they can take the benefit of the Inflation Reduction Act, in that for every kilowatt hour of battery cell that is produced in North America, the US government kindly give $45 to said manufacturer. Okay, costs are going to be a bit higher in the US than China, but a lot of the line is automated too, and $45 a kilowatt hour makes a big difference. The cost of LFP cells now are around $100 a kilowatt hour, so the subsidy almost reduces that by a half. Remember, battery cells are the biggest expense of an electric car, so if you suddenly cut that cost by almost half, that's going to make a big difference. Then, not to mention the customer themselves also get to save a further $7,500 on the purchase too. That comes to over a total saving or government contribution of over $10,000 per vehicle. That's huge, and obviously very appealing to Tesla and other EV producers. Potentially even BYD eventually. When they have the resources, they might buy an old factory and retrofit it into a cell and battery factory, and also a car factory. It would mean BYD can produce their cars in the US and also save a similar amount from the US government. Of course, BYD may lose some of their advantages they have in China when it comes to manufacturing in the US. I guess we'll have to wait and find out how it all plays out. Anyway, back to Tesla and CATL. As we know, these two companies have a long history, and CATL have been supplying Tesla with their LFP cells since the start of the Model 3 factory in Shanghai. In fact, I believe that was the whole reason that Tesla set up in China, because CATL had a lot of cells available, and Tesla were limited with the 2170 cells from Panasonic, due to nickel cells being so capital intensive to ramp. Firstly, I know this gets said all the time that it loses any meaning, but this is a big deal. This is huge. Remember how I'm continually saying that EVs are still cell limited? Well, a new factory obviously reduces that limitation. Tesla was meant to reduce the limitation with 4680 cells, but they're not ramping fast enough, so Tesla have had to look for alternative solutions in the meantime. Tesla can't keep expanding with more high energy dense cells like 2170, as for one, they're somewhat primitive now, as the 4680 is a better version. But also the expense of building nickel cell factories is huge, and the time to build the factories, along with the small relative output to the footprint, it's not worth it. It's also not feasible, as more 2170 cells would cost too much, and Tesla can't get away with selling more vehicles with higher cost batteries, unless they released a more expensive vehicle, like an SUV. Anyway, I digress. I think we all know at this stage that Tesla need lower cost cells for lower cost vehicles. We don't know the details of when they plan on starting or building this plant, but one might assume that it could be around the same time as the Mexico facility. This could be the battery factory that supplies Mexico with cells for the Gen 3 vehicle, which is very likely going to be using LFP cells. But then you might wonder, why not build the factory in Mexico then? Well, remember, we haven't even had an official statement from Tesla yet of where the factory might be, so it may end up being in Mexico. But even if it's in Texas, then it's still a lot closer to Mexico than China. CATL have been building big fabs lately, or plans to. They tend to look at 100 gigawatt hour facilities these days. That's big. It's enough for probably 2 million Gen 3 Tesla compacts a year. But perhaps everything is bigger in Texas. Why stop at 100 gigawatt hours? Elon said how the majority of EVs will actually be iron-based, not nickel. Perhaps this fab has plans to be really big. Elon also saying that Tesla want to reach 1,000 gigawatt hours a year of production in the US alone. Well, Tesla will eventually have 100 gigawatt hours a year from Texas, 10 gigawatt hours from Fremont, and then another 100 gigawatt hours from the new gig in Nevada. There's still a lot of production required to hit the 1,000 gigawatt hour rate. I think we would imagine that Tesla and CATL are going to pool all their knowledge and resources together in producing these cells. I'm with the majority of you and think it would make a lot of sense to make these cells in 4680 form factor so they can also serve as a cell-to-vehicle structural pack. But Elon has said specifically on numerous occasions that Tesla will not produce a 4680 cell with LFP. Okay, I suppose if you want to split hairs, then it doesn't mean CATL won't make one. But I don't think that's what he was implying. I think they will most likely be a prismatic form factor still. But what about all the other great breakthroughs that Tesla have achieved with their battery and cell technology? The dry battery electrode process? I think as LFP cells can be produced faster and the capex required isn't as high, then in order to scale to this level of production, dry battery electrodes will not be necessary. And let's face it, Tesla is still struggling with the process. And perhaps partnering in this way with CATL is a way to navigate around those dry battery electrode issues and still scale to where Tesla want to be. Although CATL have created a lot of great battery technology themselves. For one, we have the Chilean battery, which is a structural battery pack. However, the structure is not cell to vehicle, but instead using the cooling ribbons that are used as the structure. Therefore, this would mean that Tesla can produce their cars with structural battery packs, gigacastings, and the Gen 3 production techniques without using 4680 structural packs. On top of that, we know about CATL's M3P cells that are using a ternary cathode combined with LFP cathode. This has resulted in improved energy density, yet the same cost per kilowatt hour as LFP. This is another major breakthrough that will have a big impact on the industry. We haven't actually heard much about it since the initial announcement. CATL have their new factory in Shanghai that is almost ready, which may very well be producing the cells there soon. This factory is also a big deal too, as it probably has a capacity of a further 100 gigawatt hours a year. But I'm not sure where these cells are earmarked, but supposedly for Tesla. If so, then where? Tesla are pretty much already producing enough vehicles to meet demand and are all at capacity in all their factories. Lathrop really is the only place I can think of that could handle much more cell supply, unless they also decide to use some of the cells to ramp up Berlin. Berlin isn't likely to get any major boost in cell supply until the 4680 factory is running, so perhaps they'll start producing a large number of standard range vehicles in Europe. This would reduce the cost importing them from China and could thus lower prices. However, Tesla would then need to find more buyers for the Chinese exports. You could also say the same about Texas and a standard range Model Y version produced there with these cells. But Elon has said that the Model Y standard range doesn't offer enough range to the US market. But possibly with M3P cells, perhaps they will. It does seem a bit odd that this factory isn't being built in Mexico. Perhaps Tesla are building another factory in Texas for a Gen 3 vehicle too. But then why build this battery factory in Texas then? You think it would make more sense building it in Mexico. But we don't have confirmation on the details yet, so we don't really know. Anyway, as long as we're seeing Tesla expanding their cell supply, then it seems very bullish to me. If it is for a Gen 3 vehicle, and the new vehicle is a compact with a smaller battery size, then an 100 gigawatt hour factory is going to be able to supply more than 2 million of these vehicles a year. And we've done the numbers. With the Inflation Reduction Act and Gen 3 manufacturing cost savings, we're looking at an approximate $10,000 gross profit per vehicle. If they sell 2 million a year, then that's $20 billion gross profit a year. Sure, it will obviously take some time to get there, but it's still a big number with lots of potential. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.